Hi, folks. This is Samuel Huber from SamuelHuber.net, Samuel Huber on YouTube and Facebook, Huber Family Adventures on Instagram. I'm here with the Temple Grandin, who, if you don't know who this woman is, she's one of the big faces in autism, one of the first people to really explain what it's like to be autistic. And today we're going to talking about job and employment for autistic people, and not only that, how to get your amazing ideas across. Temple, for those who don't know us, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Well, when I was a little kid, real little, no speech, all the standard autistic symptoms, I was lucky to get into good early intervention. Didn't speak until age 4. I am now a professor of animal science at Colorado State University, and it was a long journey. I was bullied and teased in high school, and the only places I had friends was shared interests. I can't emphasize enough the shared interests. And for me, it was horses, model rockets, and electronics. In fact, back in the 60s, a really cool electronics project, and it's still pretty cool, you stretch a rubber membrane over a big old-fashioned speaker and you glue little mirrors on it. Then you reflect the light off and then it'll bounce in time with the music. That was kind of stuff I was doing, but shared interests. The other thing, learning work skills. When I was 13, mother got me a sewing job, working for a lady out of her home. Well, I went to a special school. I ran their horse barn for 3 years. That's learning how to do jobs. I did career relevant internships when I was in college. I went out to my aunt's ranch. I get asked all the time, how to get into the cattle industry? Because I was exposed to it when I was 15 years old. I came from a totally non-livestock background. Students get interested in stuff they get exposed to. So that's just a little bit of a background. And often I get asked, how did I make it in the man's industry? Well, I had to be good at what I did. And when I first started out, there was a scene in the movie, you saw in the movie, where I get the card from the editor of the Farmer Ranchman magazine, because I knew if I wrote for that magazine, it would help my career. And then a week later, I wrote an article about master stasis. It was about cattle behavior in different types of squeeze chutes out at the feed yards. And so I started to get a reputation as a good writer. The other thing that was a bigger barrier for me was being a woman in a man's industry. That was a much bigger barrier than autism. And where I had most of the problems was not the owners of the feedlots. It was the foreman, that layer of middle management. That's where almost all the trouble was. But I started my business one small project at a time. And yeah, I interviewed poorly, but the way I sold jobs is I just would lay out the drawings. In fact, show you some of the drawings that are in my book on thinking and pictures. And I got some of my drawings right in here. Hopefully you can see that right there. And when I put those drawings, great big copies of it, out on the desk, the work sold it. Sell your work. Make a portfolio that can be a 30-second wow. So I'd show them the drawings, some pictures, a brochure, and let's say you're a programmer, show off the app that you made for phone, and show off some of the code. Not a whole book full of code. One paragraph of beautiful code, neatly presented. Mm-hmm. Make sure your tablet doesn't have weird, junky stickers all over the cover. Get a new cover for your computer. Because what I learned is you sell the work, not yourself. Mm-hmm. And the writing really helped me, because after I did that dip fat project, and they did manage to kill those cattle putting the metal plate in it, but you took that metal plate out and it worked. Then I wrote about it. And I wrote about it in our state farm magazine, and I wrote about it in our national beef magazine. And then that brought more jobs. It was free advertising. Mm-hmm. But that's how it started, one little small thing at a time. And then I wrote about it. And then I had to write about, why is this project unique? And the thing that was unique on that dip fat was the design of the entrance. That was really unique. And when it worked properly, it solved all the problems of cattle drowning. Mm-hmm. You know, they had to go and mess it up for me. And they managed to drown some cattle in it. That actually did happen. We took the metal plate out, and then it worked fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely inspiring for anyone who's seen Temple's movie on HBO. If you haven't, go check it out.
This is called Temple Grandin. That's the name of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Like Cher.
Yeah.
Okay. How were you able to stick to your guns so well? And because the movie, you're shown time and again, people saying no, no, like, oh, we can't. How would we be able to afford your cattle dip or your slaughterhouse?
Well, there were people in the industry that were good. There were some feed yard managers that saw my ability. The feed yard owners, they were good to me. Their foremans treated me terrible, but the owners and the big managers actually treated me well. Another thing that helped me, there was a wonderful contractor named Jim Uhl, who had seen some of my work, and he seeked me out to design projects for him. And he and Jim Uhl with it's now Agate Construction, it still exists. It used to be Agro Construction. He built those dip fat project that was shown in the movie. I also worked for a feedlot construction company for a while. That's where I learned all about the steel work and the concrete work. But be good at what I did. I was good at my writing because I'd cover the cattle feeders meetings, I'd cover dairies, a whole bunch of stuff. So I got a reputation of being a good writer, an accurate writer. It was basically selling the work and making sure the work I did was good. It was also specialized work. I picked out an area of design where there was not a lot of competition back in the 70s when I started. You know, where now today you've got a lot of people want to go into making one particular type of artwork. And you've got zillion other people doing that same kind of artwork. Pick out something unique that's a niche and make yourself very good at it.
So it seems like you got really good at basically through your artwork. So what inspired you to like use your gifts in art to get your ideas across? Because a lot of people, including myself, who are on the spectrum, have all these brilliant ideas, but they don't know how to bring it into the real world. So how did you go about doing that?
I had a gigantic motivation to prove to the world I was not stupid when I was back in the 70s. This was a huge, huge, huge motivation. Now, I can't think in generalities. You see, I'm a visual thinker. And the HBO movie showed exactly how I think visually. And then I can see a solution to a problem, or I can also see a hazard. And if I discuss some of your particular individuals that you've worked with, I might be able to think of some way to get into something good. That scene where I get the card's important because that was getting in the back door. I knew if I wrote for that magazine, I got press passes to go to big, expensive meetings. We did meetings with $500 registration fees in the 70s. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then I got the card for the national magazines in meat and in cattle. You see, I saw those doors, the back door. Half of all good jobs are the back door. So, all right, let's get a specific example. I think in specific examples. Tell me about somebody you think's got a really good idea. Maybe I'll discuss how they can get started. What is the thing that they're really good at?
Well, I can use myself as an example, Temple. So I came up with this idea for a virtual reality to help train police officers how to interact with autistic people to practice. And in the virtual reality, it would allow them to experience what the world's like as autistic people. So like there'd be things that would heighten their fight or flight response, which is, you know, triggered by everyday things. Like for you, it's the sliding door thing.
Yeah, that's sensory. One thing, the most important thing a police officer's got to do is give the person time to respond. And there is a program right now in Texas where you can get on your license, communication disorder. So it covers a lot more than just autism. But the policeman starts to get mad and then the person freezes. Most important thing you can teach them is they've got to give them time to respond. And it might be 30 seconds. That's a long time if you time 30 seconds. And there's already a program in Texas where they're doing stuff like that. You might want to look that up. And it's actually getting put on it also would apply to stutterers and people with other kinds of problems that might be slow to respond. And you know, maybe the training doesn't need virtual reality. Maybe it can be simpler. It can be done in a more simpler way. Because the things that I did when I did my first jobs, I did a drawing. Didn't cost very much money to make a drawing. And then somebody built it.
Mhm.
And when I got my first little tiny jobs, then I took pictures of them.
Mhm.
And I put those pictures in my brochure.
Mhm.
Now, some of this virtual reality animation can get very expensive.
Mhm.
You see, you just about have to make a demo of how you're going to do this. I had drawings to show people,
Mhm.
and the paper was 60 cents for the piece of paper.
Mhm.
I guess that's like $3 now, but that's still a small amount of money,
Mhm.
because you have to have something where you can show some work, where it's not just an idea.
Mhm.
That, I think, is really important.
Right.
Give me some other ideas that people have had.
Oh, and then another one is I am a public speaker on autism myself, and I've tried to get jobs on it, but they get turned away because I don't have a PhD, like like a master's like you do. And like, how do you know about autism?
Who are you trying to get to hire you to be a speaker?
Like colleges, conventions, and also institutions that focus on autism. They won't hire me because I don't have a master's
Well, I
in.
think that's one barrier. One of the reasons why I ended up going into the livestock industry, to design the things I design did not require a degree. There's two parts of engineering. There's the mathematical part, and there's what I call the clever engineering department. And all kinds of equipment, like you look inside your printer and you see how complicated it looks inside.
Mm-hmm.
That's not done by the PhDs. That's done by a maintenance shop guy that figures
Right.
out all those clever little rollers that feed the paper through it and make all the little things work in there.
Mm-hmm.
And people got those jobs just by showing work. The other thing is start out with a really good demo tape. You getting a lot of views on your stuff?
I'm getting, I'm starting to get some. I'm trying to advertise myself online, but I don't know how to, draw. I'm still learning how to draw attention to myself as a
Well,
public
the
speaker.
thing that I did, what helped me, I started as a reporter for the Farmer Ranchman. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd cover the Arizona Cattle Feeders meeting. I'd cover the University of Arizona Cattle Feedlot Field Day. I'd do a feature story on a dairy.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to build up a reputation, one little article at a time. And that didn't cost anything.
Mm-hmm.
That started to build a following. You could do the same thing with a blog,
Mm-hmm.
but I targeted the stuff. There was regular meetings I had to cover, like the
Mm-hmm.
cattle growers, the cattle feeders, the pork producers, and then there was some features that I would do, and then I also had to edit press release stuff that came in, but making myself just a really good, solid reporter for the livestock part of the magazine. And it started out one tiny article, and then I suggested to him to do a column. And then I got into a mess in the magazine where we got a new boss because the magazine was sold. I almost lost my job because the new boss thought I was weird. And then the nice lady, Susie, who did all the graphic design, she says, this new boss doesn't like you. We're going to have to get this big portfolio together. So I got all the articles I done and I put them in a big, thick portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
that thick. And I showed that to the new boss and he gave me a raise.
Oh, wow.
Saved my job by showing a great, big, huge scrapbook of every article I had done for the last 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, Susie saw the warning signs. I didn't see the warning signs. And she says, we've got to get this portfolio together.
Mm-hmm.
See, again, that's selling the work.
Right. So that's really amazing that you continue to let your work speak for itself, and that's how you maintain your job.
And nobody even knew I had autism. I was a woman. That was a much bigger barrier. But I made sure that when I covered that cattle feeders meeting, I covered it accurately. And I got respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
And when I would summarize different speakers' talks, I did not misquote them.
Mm-hmm.
People respected that.
Right.
This is right when I was first starting in the very, very beginning. And this wasn't stuff that was expensive to do either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this YouTube channel, because it's free and a free way to show my public speaking skills, because people on the spectrum are not known for being public speakers still to this day. Like
Well, I'll
you're
tell
one.
you, the first time I did public speaking in graduate school, I panicked and walked out.
Why'd
And
you
you know what I
panic?
learned the secret was?
What?
Have really good slides. Then if you freeze, but I had really good slides. And this is back in the old-fashioned kind of slides.
Mm-hmm.
And my slides of different things with cattle handling were good. But when I went to do my first big talk, I was invited to an ag engineering meeting. I practiced it in front of an old engineer, and he said I was too negative. I was saying, this is terrible, that's terrible. And Tom, the old engineer, said, that's way too negative. You've got to show something that's wrong, then show how to fix it. And I took old Tom's advice. Thank you, Tom. I don't even remember his last name. He was a guy probably late 50s, early 60s. And he counseled me. There's also a scene in the movie where my boss slammed down the deodorant and says, you stink, use it. That scene happened. I thank that boss now. I thank him. Yeah, you've got to clean that kind of stuff up.
Your
Make
parents.
yourself good at something that's a skill other people want.
Yeah, and that's really what my public speaking is about, is showing what autistic adults can do, because at least in where I live, a lot of people feel like we're kind of disabled and can't really do anything. But I'm like, you wouldn't turn down Temple Grandin, you wouldn't turn down Einstein or Tesla.
That's right. And they were probably autistic. And when I was out doing the meatpacking plant projects, like in the 80s, after I left Arizona, 80s, early 90s, out working on these great big projects, I'm going to estimate that 20% of the drafting designers I worked with, who invented all kinds of clever equipment, welders and other people, were either autistic, ADHD, or dyslexic. I know 2 people that own metal fabrication companies. They have 20 patents each apiece. This is back late 80s, early 90s. They're definitely autistic. And one of them is super proud of his patents, and he made gigantic patent posters, and he decorated his place with them on the walls. But that's again, showing off the work. And one of the worst things the schools have done is taken out the skilled trades. Now, they're not for everybody with autism. I've talked before about the visual thinkers like me. I'm what's called an object visualizer. Then you've got the mathematical minds. They're running Silicon Valley. Your programmers, your more mathematical engineers, and then you've got the word thinkers in autism that love history. And there's research that supports different kinds of minds in my book, The Autistic Brain. And the visual thinkers, for a lot of them, a skilled trade's the way to go. And there's tons of jobs. And the worst thing they did is took auto shop out, welding out, cooking, sewing, all of that stuff they took out. Big, gigantic mistake. We're paying for it now. There's a lot of equipment for factories, elevators, warehouse material handling equipment that we imported from Europe because we lost the skills to make it. The special ed department builds the stuff. And I'm saying that seriously. I've worked for every major beef company and most of the pig companies. And that's what I learned working on these jobs all over the U.S.
That's simply amazing, Temple, like that you've been all over this country, and I'm assuming that other countries have also adopted some of your ideas.
Yes, and I put a lot of ideas up on a website, and I go down to South America. Now I'm grounded now. I've had no travel since March 12th. Everything's been canceled. But then I go down to South America and find out that my dip fat design, which is online on grandin.com, my website, people are building these things. You see, but my website just has information. The other thing is keep the politics out of it completely.
Yeah, it's about the work.
Completely.
Yeah, it's all about the work.
It's all about the work, doing a skill that other people want and appreciate. That's what it's all about.
Right. And another huge thing that I've noticed, including myself, is once we get fixated on a project like a cow dip, we often forget to take care of ourselves. Like in the movie, you forgot to put on deodorant.
Well, and I had to clean that up. And it's okay to be eccentric, but I'm sorry to clean it. You need to clean it up. Right.
How do you remind yourself to take care of yourself? Because sometimes I'll forget to clean myself up and shave and stuff. Like
This is a have to. Now, I know there's a style in men's, the stubble look, but there's a special shaver for that. And no, this is a have to. It's not optional.
Yeah, because I've worked with a lot of young people on the spectrum who just don't get why this is important. Like, shouldn't my work be important? But they show up like
that boss in the movie, the editor of the magazine slammed down a deodorant. There actually was another boss that at the construction company that did the slamming down. And I'm pretty sure that boss is on the spectrum. And I thank him. And he said I had to clean it up, period. Period. And the secretaries took me out shopping. That scene in the movie's true. All they did there is they combined two bosses because they got to fit it in a 2-hour movie. But I was taken shopping. And yes, I still dressed eccentric, but no, you have to clean it up, period. And I was very angry and very upset at the time, but I look back on, thank you for doing that to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because it's not that hard to do. You know, like I find a way to do my hair that's easy. I've even learned to thin it myself with thinning scissors. Doesn't have to be the highest fashion. It just has to be neat. And then I've got my signature kind of shirts on.
How do you work past, I know you have sensory issues with being touched and stuff. How do you clean yourself out without your sensory issues interfering?
Well, some of the sensory things, there's been some good stuff done with kids. Like, let's say the kid hates the vacuum cleaner. If the kid can control the sound, they may learn to tolerate it, where they can turn that vacuum cleaner off, on and off. They can turn that hair dryer on and off, where they control it. And they might go from hating that vacuum cleaner to liking it when they control it. You see, that's a really important thing. Headsets, it's okay to have it with you, but try not to wear it. Because if you wear it all the time, your hearing is going to get more and more and more sensitive.
I did not know that.
But you need the control. It's okay to have it with you all the time.
Yeah, that's really huge. For me, I have light sensitivity, so I bring sunglasses with me, but I can't like go into a board meeting or a meeting with my sunglasses on because they think I'm not paying attention.
No, you have to take the sunglasses off.
Yeah, I have to take them off.
Yeah, you have to take them off. And but you cannot be a dirty, unkempt slob.
No.
Even in the construction business, that's not tolerated.
Yeah, and even in the cattle business, I'm assuming.
No,
too.
Even in the cattle business, no, you've got to clean it up. It's okay to smell the cattle; they don't want to smell you. It's that simple.
Yeah, that's really awesome, Temple. Another thing that I try to do on my channel is talk about how to change your perspective on your autism, because often young people on the spectrum still hold a grudge, like that they're missing out on autism. How have you been able to look at your autism in a positive way, as something that's helping you rather than hindering?
The job always came first. And then when I jumped on opportunities like getting that card and writing the article, I saw that door. You see, there's a lot of situations where a kid could get a job in the neighborhood, and that can work up. With Jim, the contractor, he had a guy work, a young kid that started working for him just as a laborer, and the guy's about running the company now. I've seen these sort of situations over and over again. And just learn on the job. And there tends to be in autism, you tend to have your visual thinkers. They're going to be your skilled trades, make any kind of machine work, your graphic designers, artists, then your mathematicians, they're going to be computer programmers, all of the tech stuff out in Silicon Valley. And then you get your word thinkers, they're good with words, often love history. And they make good journalists.
Why do you think they make such good journalists?
They're accurate. Because the thing, I got a reputation that when I covered that cattle feeders meeting, it was covered accurately. And people respected that. And I did not misquote the speakers. I never editorialized when I covered a meeting about what the speakers said. I just summarized what the speaker said.
Yeah.
And again, that's a situation where you're selling the work. And the first thing you got to do is kind of see the goal. For me, the scientist and the inventor comes first, autism secondary. And the thing that's interesting, I've gone out to Silicon Valley. I've been in all those tech companies. Half those programmers are autistic, and they avoid the labels. They're worried about the label holding them back. Now, where a label can help an older person is with relationships. That's where it can help. I got another book called Different, Not Less. And it's about 14 older people, all employed on a spectrum. And where the diagnosis helped was understanding their spouse. That's where it was helpful.
That's
Okay, what else besides public speaking for autism do you think you'd be good at doing?
The other thing it is I'm a good writer myself, and I'm trying to I've been published a few times myself in small autism magazines, and
Okay.
so I'm trying to get myself out there. I'm trying to learn how to, like you, translate autism for a
All
neuro.
right, how about something that has nothing to do with autism? What are you good at that has nothing to do with autism? I did 10 years of cattle industry before I did anything for autism.
Another thing I'm pretty good at is like music theory and like how to like record music and music arrangements.
Well, why don't you start doing some of that for somebody? Make yourself up a demo and put it up on YouTube of music stuff. Put that up, make a website. I'd have 2 websites, one for autism and one for music with totally different domain names. And just put your music arranging stuff up there and that you have a service for this. You know, right now, you know, even now with COVID, we're still getting some design jobs. I had one come in, I talked to this morning at a dairy on designing some cow handling facilities. No, if you're good at music arranging, put stuff up where people can hear it. Make a website for your music. You've got more tools now to show off your stuff than I had. I had basically, when I started out, the Arizona Farm Arrangement was the only platform I had. And then I got the 2 of the national magazines that I wrote for. 3 magazines. Yeah. Make a really nice website for some of your music stuff. That's what I would do.
Thank you, Temple. I definitely will do that, and I'll definitely send you a link when it's up to get your opinion on it.
And get a domain name that people can remember. When they were trying to, I remember reading about Google, and that name comes from like an astronomically big number, but they changed the spelling of it. They said they changed the spelling because they want people to spell it right so they could find it.
Right.
The domain name had to be easy to spell and easy to remember. Because I remember when all this stuff started. And a lot of my work I did pre-internet. You got more platforms now than you ever had. Than I ever had.
That being said, if you were to start, like, say you were to start over right now and you had all these platforms, how would you go about advertising yourself?
Well, I still would be writing for the magazines, but they'd be online, some of it. That's the same. I might have my website. And I'd make that a brochure. I have another website that Mark, my assistant, has done, GrandinLivestockHandling.com. That's a brochure website. Yeah, I've got my websites. That's what I would do now. And the other thing I did is when I got asked to do speaking engagements in cattle, I jumped on them. I went to those doors. And my very first speaking engagement, old Tom, the engineer, said I had to be not so negative. I can't just say, this is terrible, this is terrible. I had to present things in a more positive way. But when you get it, in the 70s and 80s, every speaking engagement I got invited to, I did. Because that would, and I made sure I had really good slides of equipment and animal behavior in pigs and cattle both.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I think I'm definitely going to start building my portfolio, both as a public speaker and as a musician.
I'd make them as separate websites. There's a music website with its domain, and then you can have an autism website, and I'd make totally different domain names.
All right, thank you. So what the other huge thing is, I heard you earlier mention that you wrote a book on adult relationships, and that is really interesting. Because when I was researching, I didn't see that book. And I have a wife myself, and people look at me as like this autistic unicorn, like that. We can't.
Well, there's a lot of I've had wives come up to me at the Denver airport and said, your book, Thinking in Pictures, saved our marriage because now I understand my engineer husband. The other thing I found at the autism meetings, I'd have all these grandfathers coming up to me, and they would find out they were autistic when the grandkids were diagnosed. And granddaddy had been a NASA engineer or some other really good job like that. And he says, oh, you look at the control room there from the 60s, half of them are on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
They were recognized for their work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the big things that my wife watched your movie for the first time, and she really understood the way I think, thanks to how visual your movie is.
Well, good.
And
that's good.
And she spent the rest of last night saying, when I say this word, what image comes up in your head? Because I'm like, I think like Temple, like I have a Google in my head.
That's what I have. Google images in my head. That's what I have. And the HBO movie showed very accurately exactly how I think. The visual thinking is accurate. All the projects in that movie are accurate. I actually did all of those projects.
Yeah. So in your opinion, in that book, how did you find that autistic people build those deep, meaningful relationships like a marriage?
Well, it's going to start, I think, through shared interests.
Mm-hmm.
Two computer programmers, people where there's some kind of a shared interest, because I'm really a big, I think it's really important, friends through a shared interest.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in high school and getting bullied, those were the only places I was not bullied. Was horseback riding, horse barn, model rockets. I was a big hit when I made a model rocket to look like our headmaster. and electronics. Things like the speaker with the rubber membrane with little mirror bits stuck on it. That was some of our electronics projects. And fairly simple things. Get them involved with shared interests. One enterprising teacher started a Star Wars club in her class, and then the autistic kid got some friends through that. That's not expensive to do.
No.
There's a lot of simple things that you can do.
But the other huge thing that I've been asked and that I noticed during the movie is you didn't like being hugged, but then I saw in like 2010 you're quoted as saying, "Oh, I like hugging people now."
Well, I got the squeeze machine helped me to get desensitized to that. You see, I could control the squeeze machine. See, this gets back to the whole thing with the sensory stuff. This element of control. Now with COVID, we can't touch anybody. Now with social distancing. And I have a lot of families ask me how people cope with that. And I said, look up this video, Life on the International Space Station. Just type that into YouTube. It's cramped, tight living quarters. You're not going to see the spacewalk part. You're going to see where they sleep, where they eat, and you're going to see the bathroom. And you're going to think that's not very much fun. Living together in tight quarters. And one thing is having a schedule. You get up in the morning. You got to do your station maintenance. Then you got to do your experiments. Then you have a midday meal, and then you have to take turns on the exercise equipment 2 hours a day, or your health's going to go to heck. And then you also have some alone time. That's scheduled. One astronaut had brought up on a supply rocket a big, huge, fat paperback book. You're allowed to have a few things brought up from home. They've accumulated 2 musical instruments on the space station, a guitar and a keyboard, and a zillion DVDs because they can't stream. And so they've collected a ton of DVDs, and you can also look out the really cool window they have in the space station. But a schedule is part. I find for me now we're kind of locked down still. Get up in the morning, dressed for work by 8, showered and dressed for work. That's going to help you a whole lot.
With forming relationships like that, having a schedule, having a routine is so important. Be like dressed ready to have a relationship with another person is what you're saying.
Well, that's right. And then like everybody else, you had to learn how to use Zoom. And originally I'm getting my classes online. I've learned a lot there. I've learned a lot about running video conferences. There was a big, fat, huge had to there. It was hard for everybody to learn this stuff.
Speaking of, I guess, COVID-19, like you're saying you're still teaching your classes and all that.
Well, we just finished up our school year just finished. And what I've learned, I think the best way to do is put the lectures online, and half my lectures were professionally produced and the other half were yakking PowerPoint slides. This summer, I've got to get all my lectures much more nicely edited. And then watch the lecture online, video discussion after they've watched the lectures. That's the way to do it.
How are you like taking care of yourself during this time? Because a lot of people on the spectrum were really struggling during this academic. But how do you?
In what way are they struggling?
Well, being trapped inside and their routine has been broken.
You have to make a new routine. Make a new routine. One family, they're doing church online, and the most successful churches online have been ones where you do the sermon, then it's video conferences with different groups after that.
Hmm.
And that's worked a lot better than just putting the church service up online from empty church.
Mm-hmm.
You see, that's the same thing I've learned from, from my classes. Make a new routine.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you've got to do. You got to replace it with something else. And no laying around in your night clothes. It's get up. The astronauts aren't allowed to lay around in their night clothes. Mission control is going to wake you up, Houston time. And you can have a controller yelling at you, or you can have music, whichever you'd rather have. No, you're going to get up. There's a midday meal. Everybody has to be at the midday meal. That's written really big on the schedule. I actually got a hold of an actual space station schedule because I thought that that might be helpful. And actually what Scott Kelly, the astronaut that was there all for an entire year, he said he'd rather be locked down in his apartment than a year in the space station.
Yeah, because you definitely like you can go out of places, but there's nowhere to go in space.
Well, yeah, and the other thing you talked about was conflict between people.
Mm-hmm.
And that he had to learn is going to be conflict. There was. On one of the Russian space stations, they got mad and turned off mission control. And there was, what Scott Kelly said, you have to figure out how the other person thinks, and there has to be time to be away. Unfortunately, the space station's big enough. It's got like 5 rooms.
Mm-hmm.
They can get away from each other. Even though they got to sleep all close to each other, they can go into other parts of the station and just have alone time.
Mm-hmm.
Or play one of the instruments, or read a book, or watch a DVD.
Speaking of conflict resolution, what are some ways that you resolve conflicts when you're having conflicts with a friend, especially now that we're all trapped in tight quarters? What would be some?
Well, the thing is, of course, there's certain subjects you might just agree to disagree. I'm not going to talk about politics, but that be an area where I have friends where politics is different. We agree to disagree, and we don't discuss it. Mm-hmm. And spend your time talking about things that you like to do together, mm-hmm. about gardening or whatever. Mm-hmm. Things where you do agree. I have a lot of friends that don't agree on a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. And we just agree to disagree on certain things, and then we just don't discuss them.
I like that, straight to the point.
Like, I think that's the best thing to do, because even the best of friends are not going to agree on everything. Mm-hmm.
All right. I always like to end all my interviews, Temple, with the following questions. If you could change the way the world sees autism in one way, what would it be and why?
Well, let's show what we can do. I really liked what Stephen Hawking told the New York Times right before he died, the famous physicist. Mm-hmm. And he's in a wheelchair, he could barely move, and he goes, concentrate on those things. Your disability doesn't prevent you from doing well. And what he could do well was math in his head and float around in the weightless plane. Mm-hmm. Math in his head, and he could do it super well. That's what he did. And he has a lot. We learned a lot about black holes from Stephen Hawking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we have learned a lot from a lot of people that are such visual thinkers like yourself. And I
want to emphasize, not everybody with autism is a visual thinker. Some are word thinkers. These are the ones that often love history and facts. Mm-hmm. And then others are the mathematical minds. They're going to be programmers, mathematicians, computer scientists, and then the more mathematical parts of engineering. Because going back to the food processing plants, the visual thinkers make the clever equipment. The mathematicians do boilers and refrigeration. Mm-hmm. I don't understand boilers and refrigeration. That takes too much mathematics. Mm-hmm. And I saw that division of labor at every single food processing plant that I ever went in. Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is for autistic people to play to their strengths and show, you want the world to focus on our strengths, not our weaknesses.
Well, yeah, and if you're good at arranging music, put some of your arrangements up online and show them to people. Now with music, you can get into copyright issues. So on some of those things, you might have to save them for private showing when you're just trying to impress a client.
Right.
And then if it's original music, that's fine. But again, it's showing your work.
Mhm. All right, Temple, thank you so much for coming on my show. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Everyone, that was Temple Grandin, professor in Colorado. She has a HBO movie about her life. Check it out. This is Sam Huber from Heroes of Autism signing off.